Okay. And welcome everybody to Friday afternoon at the Manor online. And I'm going to share my screen. And now, John Philip Newell is a wonderful uh, theologian and spiritual leader in Scotland. And so, what he's doing is a series. One second, I just realized I need to stop sharing. And I need to make sure that we can see and hear. Yes, we need to optimize so we can hear the. Hmm, there we go. Good. Okay.
Welcome to our garden in Edinburgh, where I'm in conversation with my son Cameron, where we're asking how do we access wisdom in the midst of the pandemic, and also asking how shall we choose to live beyond the pandemic? That is, what are the things that we will be wanting to change, both individually and collectively? And we're speaking specifically about the context of the pandemic, but also in the context of the many struggles and sufferings that are happening now in our world between races, between nations, between peoples. Every week we've been drawing on the great teacher before us and asking if they were with us now, what might they say to us? Today I'm going to be drawing from the wisdom of a young Jewish woman in the Netherlands, Etty Hillesum, who lived and died during the Nazi occupation of her homeland. Etty, as a very young woman in her 20s, witnessed the rounding up of her people into ghettos before being sent to transit camps uh, before the long journey to Auschwitz. During these years, Etty kept a diary, writing a diary at exactly the same time as Anne Frank was keeping her diary. Etty saw her own diary as a type of dialogue with God. In fact, that was very much how she saw her life, as a dialogue with God. And by God, she meant that unnameable presence at the very heart of our being, that sacredness deep within us all. Dialogue for Etty, in part, was how to release that deepest dimension within us and one another. There are two things that particularly strike me in Etty's diary. One is that in the midst of the horror of what was happening to her people and the way her own life was therefore under threat, it was her practice when she was still living in Amsterdam during those final days to spend time gazing out of her window at a beautiful blossoming jasmine. And then when she was in the transit camp in Westerbork, it was her practice often to go to the fence of the camp and gaze across the fields at the yellow blossoming. What we see in Etty is something very similar to what we heard in episode 2 about needing to hold together these two wings of awareness of life's ongoing beauty and blossoming, and awareness also of the unimaginable suffering that is happening. We see that in Etty. The other thing that strikes me in Etty's diary is that she speaks of believing that a new day will come, and she hopes that she will be part of that new day, and says that what she can offer to that new day is to be the voice or the soul or the memory of the people who have suffered, because their soul belongs in the new day. What is the new day that we are longing for? A new relationship with the sacredness of the earth, a new relationship between us as peoples and as nations and individuals, a just and reverent relationship. Etty said, at the end, the only way of truly preparing for the new day is to live it now in our hearts. Etty's voice lives among us, and I believe she is inviting us to live the new day that we are hoping for now within us, and to see that living the new day in our hearts as preparing for the foundations of real change.
Here we are. So I thought as we segue into the next point, how we could ask the question, how are we experiencing new day now for us? Any thoughts come to mind for people?
Wake up early one mornings and I just look out the window and I see the sunrise.
Okay.
That's a new day.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, mine come at the end of the day. We've been having some glorious sunsets.
We were doing a Zoom call last night with our American family because we would have been in Chicago, and we had a Zoom call with I think about 40 people on it in different homes, and it was bittersweet, but it was good to be able to see people, and as much as apparently the family in St. Louis, they were also part of it. They tried to recreate the meal we normally would make with not with the 300 crab cakes, but with a small scaled down version. And but it was good to be able to see people. Anyone else for what new day is for them right now?
Yesterday, I had an interesting experience. I pretended to play the violin for a movie,
And what was the name of the movie?
Christmas in the Wilds,
Oh, okay.
shown on TV next December.
Oh, very good. Okay.
It was filmed at the Drysdale Christmas Tree Farm.
And where's that one?
It's near Alliston, south of Barrie.
Oh, okay. No, yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, and over to you, Susan.
Okay. Thank you all for coming to our Friday afternoon series. Our first speaker is Catherine Switzer, who is the director of the Morley Bedford Funeral Home. Just to give us a 101 on funerals, what's good to know about them, what you may need to know before it happens to you or someone you love, or just useful knowledge. So, Catherine, please.
It's actually Cynthia, but that's okay.
Cynthia, sorry.
Yeah. Remember, everyone, mute yourself so while Cynthia is speaking, so we don't get a lot of background noise. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending the seminar this afternoon. I hope you find it to be helpful. I've been with the Morley Bedford Funeral Home since August of 2004. I started as an intern, and I've been with the firm ever since. I'm going to show you some slides today, and then I believe we're going to have a Q&A afterwards. So please don't hesitate to ask me any questions or if you need clarification on any of the material. Thank you, and let's get started. Okay, so the title of the presentation is Funeral Planning 101. Again, my name is Cynthia Switzer, and I work at the Morley Bedford Funeral Home, located at 159 Eglinton Avenue West. So sometimes you may ask yourself, why bother pre-planning? But there are some very good reasons why it may be a consideration. And so I'll just go through all of the points one by one. So to pre-plan will reduce the stress of your family having to make decisions on your behalf in a short amount of time. To be honest, when someone passes away, feelings change, people are tired and grieving. And to have some thoughts recorded in a file will definitely alleviate your family's stress. And it provides reassurance that your wishes will likely be fulfilled. And the reason why I say likely is because funeral arrangements can be changed by the family or next of kin, but by pre-planning and recording thoughts, then in most scenarios, the family will likely follow them. It minimizes uncertainties amongst family members. This is very true. I've had a lot of meetings with families over the years, and a lot of debate around the arrangement table as to, what mom or dad wanted. And so this really, really does help them a lot. The comfort of knowing it is all taken care of. Whenever I meet with a person who wishes to pre-plan, often they remark at the end of our meeting that they feel so much better knowing that their wishes are recorded, and then they really don't have to think about it anymore. They can just continue living their lives. So if you decide to pre-plan and also prepay, you beat the cost of inflation. And I'm going to go over prepayment towards the end of the presentation. So this next slide, it kind of relates one of the biggest decisions that needs to be made when a person passes away or in a pre-planning scenario. Often I've met with families and they've been absolutely stumped over whether the person, the loved one, was to be buried or cremated. So I think it's a good idea to at least decide that. If you know nothing else about your arrangements, at least knowing whether you are going to be buried or cremated will help your executor and your family. So I want to go over some pros and cons of each scenario, burial and cremation. You may know a lot of this information already, but sometimes it's nice to have it, laid out in front of you. So the pros of burial would be the body remains intact. And that's really kind of a psychological reassurance. Some people just do not like the idea of cremation, but would prefer for their body to, be in the earth or in a mausoleum. For burial, it can also comply with family history. Even though cremation has been around for several years now, there are many families that still, prefer burial. And if that's important to you, then you may want to keep with that, with what's happened in the family already. The burial needs to be conducted in a timely manner. And I feel that this is a pro because with cremation, the ashes can often remain at the funeral home for a long period of time. They can remain in someone's home because there isn't that sense of urgency to do anything with the ashes. They can basically just exist, and sometimes burials and entombments will be delayed. Also with burial, it is an environmental means of final disposition. Lately, in the last few years, green burials have really become a more popular choice. And that means that a person is buried inside an environmentally friendly container. There is no embalming. There is usually not a public viewing. And there are actually a couple of cemeteries in Ontario that are exclusively geared towards green burials. In fact, there is one in my hometown. It was actually the first one, which is Cobourg, Ontario. They have a nice big cemetery, and one section of it is designated for green burials only. The situation occurs when we would take a person there in a vehicle, and the grave is actually hand dug. So it's quite interesting, and I think something that will gain in popularity over the years to come. Cons of a burial. It is very, very expensive to purchase burial plots. I'm speaking for Toronto. I can give you an example. Mount Pleasant's single graves cost over $20,000 now. In fact, Prospect as well out in the West End is also very expensive. So unless you have an existing plot, to purchase a plot, you're looking at quite a bit of money here in Toronto. The digging fee of the grave is at least twice expensive as cremation. Because we're digging a larger grave and going at much extra depth, there is more of a digging fee. And right now at Mount Pleasant, it's about $1,500 for the opening and closing of the grave. Caskets can be pricey, but there are different ranges of caskets, starting at $1,000 and going all the way up into the, $20,000, $30,000. So, it's a good idea to ask your funeral provider for options. And the burial needs to be conducted in a timely manner. I also put that down because, in these days, sometimes family is gathered all over the world. And so if a person is going to be buried and people who are abroad want to attend the burial, they have to, arrange for flights, and this has to be done in a very quick time frame, which can cause a little bit more stress for families. And cremation. So the pros of cremation is that it's very cost effective. To cremate a person, the cremation fee itself, it's about $600 as opposed to opening and closing a grave for $1,500. There are different options with regards to cremation. Cremated remains can be scattered, buried, or placed in a niche, which is an above ground compartment at a cemetery. You may have seen them before where there's a window, you can look and see the urn. Urns can be kept at home. Nothing has to be done right away, but if a person, feels that they want to have the person at home with them for a period of time, they are able to. Often we divide cremated remains, and sometimes family members will purchase little keepsake urns, and then perhaps the larger portion is buried or scattered. So that's kind of nice for families. They can keep the remains at home. A viewing or service can still be held before cremation takes place. Not a lot of people know that. They figure that, we receive the person and then we take them to the crematorium right away, when in fact, we can still have a person at a visitation, we can have a casket at a service, and then the cremation would take place after. With cremation, there is more time to plan a service. That's in the event that cremation would take place prior to a service. I've had situations where families have waited 6 months. Perhaps a person died, in January, and then the family's going to gather in the spring. So that leaves more time to plan a service. It's also easy to travel with cremated remains. I've met with a lot of clients who have remarked that they're going to take part of the cremated remains, to the ocean or to the mountains in BC. And we would provide the appropriate paperwork for travel. And you can just take the cremated remains with you in your carry-on if that's an option. The cons of cremation. So cremation is permanent. It cannot be undone. So it's a very careful decision to make. There is an environmental impact as well. Cremations generally take about 2 hours at, of course, high heat, and takes a lot of energy to cremate a body. Families are often overwhelmed by options. So whether to scatter, bury, place in a niche, whereas with burial, it's pretty straightforward as to what would be done with a casket. Can be difficult to organize a final resting place for the ashes if there is a family dispute. And I've encountered this a few times where urns, are sometimes left behind at the funeral home. At our funeral home, we allow families to keep their urn for up to a year. We can store it. And we do have quite a few urns that have not been picked up. And so it's important to perhaps think about the final resting place and have that organized if you're opting for cremation. So there are a couple of alternative options. So I think I mentioned entombment a couple of minutes ago. And so that is the practice where a family would purchase a crypt in a mausoleum. And so the casket is not buried in the earth. It is actually placed into a compartment in a sort of a big building. There are other caskets in slots nearby, and Prospect Cemetery offers a mausoleum. Not really a popular choice, but it is one of the options. Another option, and probably the most cost-effective, would be a body donation to the University of Toronto for medical research. This is something that's arranged directly with the University of Toronto, but keep in mind that not all remains are accepted. But if a person is accepted, then the University of Toronto will utilize the remains for research purposes and teaching. And then afterward, the person is taken to St. James Crematorium down at Parliament and Wellesley Street, and they're cremated there. And then the urn can be buried in a section designated for people who have donated their bodies. And then there is a nice little commemorative service every spring for people who have donated their remains to U of T. So I'd like to talk about 3 different events. And again, you may be familiar with these events. Over the years, you may have attended some of them, and I'll just give you a little more insight on their purpose. So first, we'll start with the visitation. The visitation allows friends and family to share their support and show their respect for the deceased, the family, and the community. Less formal than a funeral, it's a time for reflection and shared memories. The visitation can take place the afternoon, evening prior to the service, or even an hour prior to the service. The visitation is held in a large room, and a casket can be present or an urn can be present. There are other situations where we do not have either a casket or an urn present, and the family just prefers to have, the photographs and the flowers. Music is often played, something that was special to the deceased and played in the background. And there are often photos available for reflection. We've been conducting a lot of slideshows in recent years. People really enjoy the slideshows. They facilitate conversation, and it's nice to give a historical account of a person's life. The one aspect that I like to emphasize when planning visitations is personalization. It's very important and meaningful for guests to walk into the room and automatically get a capture, get an essence of what the person's life was about. And that could be done by bringing items to the funeral home, such as we've had hockey jerseys, golf clubs, tea sets, quilt work, any sort of knitting work. The most recent item that we've had is Mom's baked cookies. So the family made the cookies, brought them to the funeral home. They were set out and clearly identified as Mom's favorite cookie recipe, and people really like that. They feel that they get to know a person a little better, or it brings up some memories of what that person enjoyed. Guests can usually make a donation in the deceased memory at the visitation. The family chooses one or a couple of charities that are meaningful. Often these could be animal charities, perhaps maybe something to do with a certain condition. And often the charities will be named in the obituary. The service. I think most of you likely know what's involved with a funeral service, but I've just made a few sentences here to shed some light. So the funeral service is a formal occasion where friends and family honor the deceased. It usually takes place in a church, funeral home, or a venue that is suitable for the family. Like a wedding, a service is also a celebration and may include music, readings, and other tributes that speak to the life and spirit of the deceased. Ritualistic elements related to religion and culture are often part of a service. The minister will provide assistance in planning a service that is fitting for mourners, and a program is usually provided. So during the time of the service, often, there are a couple of tributes, perhaps talking about a person's work life, their family life, and just, to provide a personal account of a life well lived. And I think every life is worth celebrating in some way. The reception. I'm sure most of you have been to a funeral reception. You likely recognize the typical funeral sandwiches. And the reception is where family and friends can reflect on the spirit of the deceased, as well as receive and provide emotional support. Like the visitation, the reception is held in a more relaxed setting that often includes food and beverages as well as music. The reception is usually preceded by the service. If burial is taking place, it will often happen after the reception. So before the pandemic, we were holding a lot of services both at churches and at the funeral home. And almost always the family likes to have a reception after. It's kind of a nice way, for people to greet each other, especially if there was no visitation planned. Sometimes families just prefer to have service and then a reception to follow. And the reception is the informal time of gathering. In some situations, there is a cemetery visit planned, either with a casket or an urn. And in recent years, the family has remained at the church or funeral home, and they've had their reception, and then they will go on to the cemetery. Historically, you may have experienced situations where the cemetery visit happens right away after the service takes place. But these days, families, they really value that time with their friends. And so they prefer to stay right after the service for the reception, just so they don't lose any of their guests and they're able to meet with them. There are different catering options as well. We've had not only the sandwiches, but we've had, hot lunches. Some of the deceased favorite food is also another way that, the events can be personalized. We've had, Middle Eastern food, Caribbean food, Hungarian food, and there are several caterers in Toronto that, will accommodate a family and their wishes. So once you've decided, between burial and cremation, and then what kind of event you would like, you may consider prepayment. Prepayment is a good idea for a number of reasons, and I'd like to share them with you. So the benefits of prepaying. Decisions have been made when a person has been thinking rationally. So often people prepay, they may have actually just, arranged for a loved one's funeral, and then that usually starts them thinking about their own pre-arrangements. And I think it's good to prepay when a person is thinking rationally, only because, there are times when people are vulnerable. And when a person passes away, they may, I would say, purchase more than they actually need because they're grieving, they're upset, and they really want, to honor the deceased, and it may not be the most appropriate way. It's also peace of mind knowing that your family doesn't have to come up with the funds in a short amount of time. Often funeral homes will require a 50% deposit after arrangements have been made. So knowing that the plan has been prepaid does eliminate your family having to scramble to make sure that there is enough money. The average funeral costs about $10,000, and then you have also funeral or flowers. Obituaries are quite expensive. We often publish obituaries in the Toronto Star and Globe and Mail, and they can be $2,000-$3,000 per paper per day. So knowing that there is some money set aside, can really help a person and reassure them that the finances will be taken care of at the time. By prepaying, there is you basically beat the cost of inflation because prices are locked in at the time of prepayment. And so this means that, let's say you pay $1,000 for a casket and it's 2020. A person lives until 2040. So at that time, there is no more money owed on the price of the casket. At the time of the need, the family will not owe any money on the items that have been prepaid. I'll explain a little bit more on that in one of my next slides. There is no question about your wishes. I feel that if a person has made the effort to prepay, that you know, they've thought it through, they've done their research, and you know, this is exactly what they want. Plans are fully portable and can be canceled at any time. But please keep in mind that the funeral home is allowed to take an administrative fee of 10% of the prepaid cost up to $350. So there is a little bit of an admin cost. Funeral homes can decide whether or not they want to take the administrative cost, but that's, you know, one of the kind of drawbacks of prepaying. You know, things do change, and we have had a few funeral arrangements that have been transferred to other funeral homes. Let's say a person moves, they move to, you know, Lindsay, Ontario. They decide they want to retire there and settle down. Then the plan can be transferred to another funeral home. One thing that is that comes up once in a while is I've had families ask me, you know, what happens if Morley Bedford's closes? And I know Trull on Yonge Street closed almost 2 years ago now. And so what happens when a funeral home closes is that the prepaid arrangements are transferred to a funeral home nearby. And the client will receive a letter stating that, you know, the funeral home is closed, and now the pre-arrangements exist at, you know, another funeral home, hopefully in the neighborhood. And so at that time, the client can decide whether they want to keep their funeral arrangements with the new funeral home or if they want to move them to another funeral home. So how prepayment works. So when you meet with a funeral director and you have discussed, you know, what you're looking for in terms of, you know, services and merchandise, then they will draw up a contract clearly stating the cost of all of the services and merchandise and the terms of prepayment. Payment can be made in full or by installments. Sometimes people, you know, they have the cash ready, they can pay in full, and, you know, that's it, they receive a certificate. Other times families prefer to pay in monthly installments, and that's just fine. You know, we can do pre-authorized payment from a person's bank account or credit card payment. Other times families, you know, just prefer to put a down payment on the plan, and then they'll just add funds as they see fit. So for example, let's say the funeral is $10,000, they may put down $2,000, and then every couple of months or so they send us a check, or, you know, they give us their credit card number and they ask us to make further deposits. So with prepayment, at our funeral home, funds are invested in trust with a bank or a trust company in an interest-bearing account. So the interest is fairly low. It's at about 2%, but it's protected. It's CDIC protected. There's insurance on it. So there is really never a chance that a client will lose their prepaid funds because of the economy. There are no age limits or health questions. So for people who are prepaying, you know, and they're a little older, they don't have to worry about paying high premiums because we never ask a person's age or any kind of health questions. So what happens is, from the time of prepayment, interest accrues. And when a person passes away, the funeral home will apply the initial prepayment plus interest to the cost of the funeral at the time of need. So because our prices go up, they go up at Morley Bedford's every couple of years, we do have to take the interest that accrues. But that also means that the family does not owe any more money on the items that have been prepaid. I know that may seem a little unclear, but it's totally geared towards the consumer, yet the funeral home still has to operate in order, to stay open. So what happens is we apply the initial prepayment plus the interest to the cost of the funeral. In some events, I want to mention, especially during COVID, we have had a few people pass away, and they've had, large funeral plans where they've had, the visitation, the service, the reception. They paid, quite a bit of money. And unfortunately, during this time, we haven't been able to honor all of the services, because we're really not able to, have many services right now, or at least a full service. So in that situation, the family will receive a refund. So if not all of the goods and services are honored, then often there is a refund, and then we just send them a check. The funeral home may offer insurance products as well. At the Morley Bedford Funeral Home, we only offer trust. We just feel that it's very simple, and there are so many different insurance products that we just feel that trust is the most straightforward way for people to prepay. But if you're interested in insurance, then you can certainly look into it. Assurant Life of Canada is one of the bigger vehicles that offer insurance products to clients. Please know that prepaid funds are protected by the Bereavement Authority of Ontario's Compensation Fund. And the Bereavement Authority of Ontario is our governing board. And every year, funeral homes contribute to the compensation fund. So I want to tell you about it, just because I know that some funeral homes have had a reputation of illegal practices, if you will. So, if you wonder, oh gosh, I want to prepay, but I'm worried about the funeral home. I just read this in the news. Please know that if anything happens, there are always, a few bad apples in every profession. That the Bereavement Authority of Ontario has a lot of money in their compensation fund, and no one will ever lose their money because of that. And I want to inform you of another aspect of pre-planning. I feel that people are often, kind of shy to pre-plan. They're deterred from calling a funeral home because they feel that they have to pay. We have a lot of pre-planned files with no prepayment at the funeral home. Sometimes, people have their money in investments, or, they have enough money set aside to pay for their funeral at the time of need. And in that case, it may be just helpful to sit down with a funeral director, record your wishes, and then have the file at the funeral home. You do not have to prepay. No matter what anyone tells you, you are under no obligation to prepay for your funeral expenses. You can always call the funeral home and ask for an estimate. You can do this yearly or even every 6 months, and just to get an idea of what the cost will be. Costs do go up, but some people, again, they feel that prepayment isn't really necessary, but it may be a good idea just to have your wishes recorded in a file. So I'm going to wrap it up just with some final thoughts. And this is really my advice to anyone who is interested in pre-planning. And you may recognize Spanky from The Little Rascals, a great show that I watched when I was young, and maybe you did too. So this is my advice. to take before you pre-plan is to talk to your friends. They may refer you to a reputable firm that worked well for them. Sometimes it's difficult to know where to go, especially in Toronto. There are several choices of funeral homes. And if you're comfortable, maybe just reach out to your friends, talk to them about, maybe an experience they had that was good or an experience they had that wasn't so good. And that may be a good start. I think there's no better way to find, a funeral home than by a referral. So once you've, selected maybe a couple of funeral homes to look at, you could visit the funeral home's website to gain knowledge. Luckily, these days, most every funeral home has a website. They often post, their price list, some information about the staff members, perhaps a little bit of history about the funeral home, about the family that started it, and lots of pre-planning information. You can often fill out forms online and email them to the funeral home, and that kind of gives a little bit of a start. I recommend that you do your research before visiting the funeral home. There is an excellent source of information on the Bereavement Authority of Ontario's website. It's www.thebao.ca. And again, they're the governing body that looks after our funeral directors. They regulate cemetery legislation, and there's lots of information on that website for the consumer. If you would like to visit a funeral home, I suggest that you call ahead to make an appointment. And that's just so the funeral director can be prepared. They'll expect you. These days, sometimes dropping by at a funeral home, there may be a service taking place, and or the directors may be in meetings with other families. So I recommend that you do call ahead. Prepare a list of questions. And I've answered all sorts of questions over the years, and people are often, will often say, I bet you've never heard this before, or I have a strange question, and it really doesn't matter. I want people to have a full understanding of the commitment that they're entering, or if they have any questions about any of funeral practices. Also, take your time to think about it. Just because you've visited a funeral home, you've received an estimate, and the funeral director is glad to have you there, and offers you maybe discounts. You can just think about it. You can take your time, walk away, ponder what you've discovered. I know at our funeral home, when we provide estimates, they're valid for 1 year from the date of issue. So there's no pressure to pay or to even commit. It's good sometimes just to gather information. And another very important aspect, something that may be looked over, or sometimes it's hard to talk about, but I think it's very important when you pre-plan to inform your family or estate trustee of where your arrangements are held, especially if you prepay, just so when the time comes, the person or people who are looking after your arrangements, they know what funeral home to call. And same with pre-planning. Some people have some very strong feelings about what funeral home they would like to have their arrangements at, and again, it's good to have a conversation with your family or your estate representative. So that's the end of my presentation today. I really appreciate you taking the time out on this Friday afternoon to listen to my presentation. And if you have any other questions, questions that can't be answered today, or they come to mind later on, then please feel free to contact me, and I'll be glad to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Now, can you stop sharing? Perfect. Okay. Now, there might be some questions. And hello, Kelly. How you doing? Good to see you. I liked your cooking show earlier today. And so anybody have any questions?
I'd just like to point out that I think McMaster University in Hamilton would also, if you wanted to donate your body to, they have medical thing, and you could check that. And I don't know if they still have, but Humber College out in Rexdale used to have funeral service programs. So for people becoming morticians,
Yeah.
I sort of like that idea for myself.
Oh, okay. That's a good point about McMaster, because I know they are a teaching, they have a hospital, they're a big medical program. So I'll look into that just in case anyone asks me about body donation.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So I know people donate body parts sometimes on their driver's license, but then they might fill that card out and they might talk to someone in your capacity. But does that also need to happen in the will?
It should, basically the powers of attorney, next of kin or executors should really be aware of that, because any sort of tissue donation should be done almost immediately after a death occurs.
Right.
By the time a will is located, it's often too late.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so if a trillium gift of life
I'm going to
is,
say, having worked in the hospital system,
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. And again, the way people are conducting things nowadays is very changes by the minute. So anyone else have any questions?
I was just going to add that I worked in the hospital system, and it was, we all had to ask when someone died of the family, was there to be donation? And at that point, you would contact the coordinators for that to talk to the family, because it does have to happen in a relatively timely fashion.
that's right.
So it's,
yeah.
if people die within a hospital setting, it's probably done that way.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, anyone? Now, Cheryl, did you have a question?
I was going to say,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Betty. Go ahead, Betty.
Betty?
ahead and pre-plan and pay for my funeral, and I'm pleased I've done that. The only thing that I found harder to deal with, because I wasn't quite ready, I'd pre-planned my mother's funeral, and when it came to choosing an urn, we just sort of discussed it with the funeral director and chose one. But when I did my own and the funeral director said, you want to choose your coffin and your urn, I said, sure. And I thought I'd be shown a catalog or something, but we went into the basement of the funeral home and I got to choose, which is kind of interesting to do. But I don't think I was mentally as prepared that I was actually going to see what the final objects would be. But having done it, it was a good thing to do. But I think if you're speaking with people and you're preparing them to make selections, it's good to prepare them for the experience.
Right, right. That's a good point. And it's interesting you say that, because we have an online catalog that we're sending to clients now in advance. And then if they want to come in and see the casket in person, then they're welcome to.
That sounds like a good way.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting, people have different frames of mind, some are just, they just want to go forward and get it done. And then, and they don't seem bothered by it at the time. And others that just want to, do things nice and slow and carefully. And, there are no right or wrongs.
No, I must admit, I found the funeral home very good in planning and working it out and following the details that you've suggested.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I'm glad to hear it. We always, no matter what funeral home a person goes to, we want people to have a positive experience and to feel some reassurance, Oh, thank you for saying. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I don't know what happened. I think my sound cut out a bit.
I think, John
I'm
Joseph,
muted.
you're on mute.
Oh, there we go.
I'm muted, as I kept asking everyone to. Does anyone have anything else to ask a question of? No one could hear me ask that. Go figure. Anyone else? No. Gerald, you're muted. Gerald, you're muted.
Oh, I didn't realize I was muted.
Okay. Did you have a
Okay.
question?
So I'd just like to make a comment. I think it's disappointing when some people decide not to hold a visitation or funeral service or any kind of special event because it really denies the community to mourn the passing of the person and share their memories.
Mhm.
I think that's so important these days. It doesn't have to be a religious service too. It could be a totally secular service, but something that commemorates the life of the person that has passed.
So I'll share with you a story. So my mother didn't want anything, but we did it. We did something anyways because it's for the people left behind, not the. And we crossed our fingers on the way over. So basically, at Manor Road, we had call it a wake, so to speak, where we had a time of she'd already been cremated, and on her birthday actually, which was about 2 months later, we had I can't remember, maybe there might have been 100 or so. I think Susan was there, Betty was there. I can't remember. I think May was there too, and maybe I'm not sure Gerald or Peter was there, but it was simply there was a large 8 large banquet tables full of food in the middle, lots of flowers, and there was a bar up by the communion table, which you can see behind me. So that basically where the communion table, there was a bar, and then what we did, I welcomed people, and the overview of the program was a time for people to remember and simply put, and around the room, what I did with each decade, she was about 90, I put the Oscar-winning picture from each year of the decades, just a sort of something spiritual but not overly religious. And then I welcomed people and said grace. And then we after to be able to time to linger a bit, we had a time to also me to speak a bit further, and then I think my sister spoke, and then my niece said some words, and there was cousins who said a few words, and we did have a piece of music, not a live music, it was recorded, and then we closed that portion with the singing of the Carol Burnett song. So,
okay.
which
That's
so
great.
it wasn't it was more of a wake than a service, but it was certainly a way for us to bring a closure, and yeah, and honor her life, definitely, and with food. Yeah. Do people have any other questions?
I just point
sure.
out that, as you say, as Gerald said, it's when we cross over, my belief is we cross over, nothing matters anymore. So this is all for the people left behind. And
yeah.
some of them want to get together, some don't. Just have it there, and if they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The funeral is for the living, definitely.
Yes. Definitely. Well, Cynthia, I want to say thank you very much for a very informative time. And again, I'm sure we'll have another 20 questions later on, because this is how things work. Ideas pop into our head, and especially during our. You can put the clapping symbol up if you can figure out how to do that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, John Joseph. It's been a pleasure, and and I wish everyone the best and good health, especially during this time. Thank you.
Okay.
Cynthia, you're more than welcome to linger on and hear what Cheryl has to offer, because
I sure will.
You might have some clients who want to make use of her service, especially with family members who have China. So, Susan, can you introduce our next wonderful speaker?
Yes, many of you have seen at programs like Downton Abbey and that, when they have the high tea, those lovely 3-tiered and 2-tiered little things, and how nice. Well, if you've got China lying around, there is somebody who can make your wish come true. Cheryl Snow will show us some of her work.
So what I'm going to do, Cheryl, I just realized, I think when we had Cynthia, we had you spotlighted. We'll figure out, I'm not sure what we did differently, but I'm going to spotlight you there. So we can see your wonderful face. Okay, there. For some reason, Cynthia, when we had you, it just did that. I'm not sure why. We're all learning how to make Zoom work differently. So over to you, Cheryl.
Okay, thank you guys for joining the meeting today, and it's my pleasure to be here as well. So as what Susan said, I'm Cheryl. I'm a mother of 3, and I have 3 beautiful kids named Liam, Bella, and Penelope. And I am a nurse by profession, and I want to share what we discovered a project me and Kelly have been doing during this pandemic. So I know it's not easy to just stay at home because everybody's at home. The kids are at home. I'm at home. Kelly's working from home as well. So we have to find ways on how to play the role together. So this project, which is the dessert tray, we started like 3 months ago, so just recently. So it's all started with my sister from the Philippines, who is a China collector. So I'm not a China collector. I only know a little bit about China, but she's the one who introduced me to it. So she asked if there is any China that I can buy from here, because most of the China that is in the Philippines are from UK itself, due to some of the Filipino nurses, I guess, who goes and work as a nurse in the UK and decided to send some of the China from there. So it's pretty interesting because Philippines has no any influence of English people. So it's really nice that they are reviving it. So for people to experience what China porcelain is, right? So it's more about the fancy stuff in the Philippines now because everything is made in England, and most of the China right now are made in China and Japan, and which is close to the Philippines. So we have this already before, but something that is made in England and is not anymore producing by England, like for example, Royal Albert, most of the Royal Albert now are not from England anymore, which is the famous brand of Bonnet China. So, and most of the people in the Philippines who are doing this are younger and people who can afford it because it's kind of expensive there. So I was shocked when my sister told me how much a teacup sells in the Philippines. So actually here you can find it for like $5, sometimes $2 for just one teacup. It depends on the brand itself. But in the Philippines, it costs like $60 to $80 and something $100 for each teacup and saucer. So the market is really different from here and in the Philippines. So it seems like they giving it more importance there compared to here, as what I see. I think probably because of the conveniency. So people doesn't have to wash it by hand. They use their machine to wash the porcelain. And when you have a big party, no one wants to wash by hand, right? So it's more about the convenience now that people tend to lean towards plastics. So, and the reason why I'm doing this is I want to, I want other country who don't have any experience about China, but disappointed China to have experiences and to revive it. And also, for people to show them that there's another way of using dessert trays instead of just buying plastics, that you can actually recycle your old china. Okay, so it's all started that I used to go to the thrift store and just buy plates, and I asked Kelly if he can drill it for me. So it's a teamwork that me and Kelly are doing. I buy the china, I go to the stores and check, or sometimes people who are selling their china. So we recycle it then. And so I'll show you how it looks like. So it's a drill. So Kelly will just drill at the back of the china. So I usually use the, what do you call this? The saucer and bread plates and the dinner plate. And I buy the, I don't know what they really call this, but it's the one that's gonna stick the plates together. So I get them at Amazon, and it's not really that pricey though. So it's really cool. So the price of the dinner plate, I mean, the tiers that they sell it online are cost from $50 to $100, and some are just like plastics. and plates that aren't as pretty as this, just like plain plates, right? But I find it like really cheaper, like if you do it on your own. So I'm going to show you some of the finished product that Kelly and I did few weeks ago. Okay. So this is a 2-tier. So we use a big dinner plate and just a salad plate. So there are different holders that you can buy, different designs. So it depends on what design of plates you have. And we also have this type wherein it's a soup bowl, wherein if people want to have like a salsa or any dip, so they can also use this. And we have this. So it depends on what brand and how rare is the plate for the china is. So that's how we show them the prices. So this is Royal Albert Petty Point. I bet some of you guys have this too. And this is really good for Christmas. It's a Christmas color. And there are different types of the holder that you can buy. So it depends how or what your tastes are, right? So yeah. So you can use it over and over again instead of buying every year some plastic ones that you can just throw after. I know it's very convenient, but it's really nice to save the earth as well for recycling. Okay. I think that's all I can say about the plates. And if anyone is interested, like if you have some plates that you want to turn into a dessert tray like this, you can just contact me and Kelly, and Kelly is willing to drill it for you guys.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Hey, Betty, I think we've got something here.
When we have our English tea.
You will.
Well, I think after the pandemic, we can have it at the church.
We had plans
we were
before all this had happened.
Right?
Cheryl,
Yeah.
Cheryl,
Yes.
it's May here. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sure.
Do you disassemble them to clean them after usage?
Yes, you can actually disassemble. It's so easy to disassemble it.
Now, is there a rubber ring between the plate itself and the hardware?
Yes, absolutely, there is.
All right, perfect. So storage is no problem, ladies, and Dr. JJ.
Okay.
Great, thank you so much.
Yes.
Well,
Brilliant.
I'll be in touch.
So many question was, it's good to hear there's a rubber ring, because I know in one version of that where we didn't have a rubber ring, every time you undid and put them back together, you ground down the china and you caused a structural problems. But that's good, because to May's point, storage, as they lovely as they are, if you leave them intact, as you know, as convenient as that is, it becomes very problematic, because it's
Yes.
very hard, definitely. But you know what I find is wonderful is Cheryl, I think you emailed me, what was it, about 2 or 3 months ago?
yes, it's only like 3 months ago.
Yeah, and then you donated one to the church, and then another one came, and but I find what's remarkable, and this is something where you can take the simplest thing, the dessert or sandwich, and put them on the 3-tier tray, and suddenly you've just raised the bar of what you're doing, and it looks much more in. You could put Girl Guide cookies on a 3-tier tray, and suddenly it looks like you have Danton Abbey set up in your midst, and there's something quite remarkable about that. And yes, we do hope to have a tea. Last year we were supposed to have a tea, wasn't it February? Or
Yes.
maybe, and then of
For
course
Valentine's Day.
pandemic came and dashed all the possibilities of that. So yeah, when we when we do figure out that again, we can certainly make that happen. I even have a samovar in my
Ooh.
collection that someone gave me. Now, Cheryl, you're familiar with a samovar?
No, not really.
Well, it's a Russian tea urn, and so they stand about would it be about 2 feet tall, but it's all silver and keep it all wrapped up in plastic. But I mean, it's another way to present and serve either mostly because it's more of a coffee thing, a samovar, but it's certainly a Russian word, but sort of a reminiscent of all these other things that we have. But you know what's interesting, Cheryl, that there are so many people who are purging their china as they retire or move or downsize. Do you put the word out there on Facebook or something?
Yeah, I usually go on Facebook because they do have this marketplace wherein they just put all their china out, right?
Right,
So
right. But even if you put it on Facebook saying, "Are you purging? I'll take your," I mean,
that's so true.
because what tends to happen is people are doing this rather quickly, and they tend to give it away very fast, and or yeah, it's a. Well, I'm sure Cynthia, you see it at your end. I mean, when people come and say, "Mom or Dad has passed," and what do we do now, right? With all the bits.
That's true. We actually have a checklist for executors, and we have a couple of auction websites, establishments that will, buy, some used goods from families. So, yeah, so it does. The most recent one was records, though.
Yes.
What should we do with records and that sort of thing? So, yeah, it comes up from time to time.
And they've gained value too. Well, related to what we were chatting about, actually years ago, my mother gave me, it was a creamer and a sugar. Was it a tea? No, it wasn't a teapot. And it was a style. I can't name the style. It had squiggly patterns on it, but you see it in China as well as architecture in the city of Toronto. And I remember I was in a purge mode, so I sold it at I think the church I was at was Maple United. We were having a yard sale or something. And then later my mother, someone told me, actually, it's quite valuable. And I said, well, you didn't tell me that at the time. And so be careful what one gives away. Definitely.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Because that's what I always encounter, like people cleaning up their garage or cleaning up their storage, right? So like mostly these are like younger people that they want to just like clean up everything. So they have no idea how much it's sold, right? So I bought one, like the entire set for only $50, wherein you can sell it for like $600. So yeah.
The Elegant Garage Sale, when it was in business, went to a website called replacements.com, I think it is. And they there you can get an idea of the value of various patterns of china.
Yeah, that's true, Susan. Yeah, replacement. They have all the designs that someone is, want to complete their set. You can get them replacement, right?
Yes.
We went to an estate sale in Detroit, and it was one of those moments we weren't going to buy anything. Of course, we did buy a few more things. But in one of the places we went to, there was a set of Noritake china, and we picked up a platter and asked the woman, so what does this cost? And she said $50. And I thought that was for the platter. She meant the whole 12-piece plate setting.
Whoa.
Which was so Cheryl, you would have just thought you died and went to heaven. I mean, pardon the expression, but the dinner plates, there was luncheon plates, there was bread plates, there was soup bowls, there was cups and saucers, there was covered serving dishes, there was platters, and I'm probably leaving things out that I think there was a teapot and a coffee pot too, and it was astounding that all this was $50. And we couldn't pack it up quickly in case you changed your mind. They kept saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" No. Okay. So yeah, you might want to just put it out there on Facebook. I mean, are you on the Davisville Parents Group?
I don't think so.
Well, it's a good group to join.
And the other one is the Young Eglinton Midtown Parents Group. You might want to go to that one too, because it's amazing how much information is shared very quickly. And if you let it be known that so many people, they inherit their aunts or grandparents' china, and it stays in a box wrapped up in newspaper because no one wants to touch it for fear they might break something or they have to clean it or do something, because a lot of it's not dishwasher proof. You may find a connection. Yeah, definitely. But certainly, Cheryl, I look forward to the time where we can have a tea at Man Road, and maybe Susan might be chatting with you about turning some of her lovely china plate. Now, what pattern is yours, Susan?
It's de Havilland Moss Rose. It was a promotion in 1970. You could get it at Loblaws. You spent so much on groceries and you got so much off on
Okay,
the price.
right. Okay, nice. Okay, nice. Yeah.
And then we have to get Pat doing her fascinators again.
Oh, yes.
She was making fascinators for the tea.
Oh yeah, good. Those have all come back in a big way. Yes.
Plans for the future.
So do we have any more questions? No. Okay.
I have one. It's May again.
Yes.
For those of us don't have access to the Royal Dalton and the Royal Alberts, can we just do it on a regular, like a plate, like a porcelain plate or just a glass plate?
Yes, totally, like a porcelain plate, because we haven't tried any other kind of plates, right? So, but porcelain, like even though whatever brand it is, like, yes, you can do that too.
So I was thinking like a Pyrex plate, the clear glass plate. Would that work?
Yes, I have no idea because we haven't tried it on the Pyrex. We only tried in a porcelain, but I think Kelly can try that too.
Might be a little harder to drill, but he'd know.
I'm sure with as long as you have 3 different sizes of plates, and with the drill, I'm sure it could probably likely work. Because the key part is, I think, with the drill, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about this, you need a high-speed drill so you don't crack the plate.
And you have to put water while doing it so it won't crack.
Oh, okay.
Because as one can imagine, if you've ever been to Ashley's, I always find it funny. They show you how durable it is, and they take the silver knife and they bang on it as if you would ever do that. I'm not sure why, but
at a wedding, come on.
Well, there you go. Yeah, a Greek wedding. Throw those. Actually, my brother's wedding in Greece, they threw plates, but I don't think they were real. Yeah. Well, this has been all very interesting today. I would say quite wonderful. And when Cheryl, I was certainly looking forward to hearing from you and Cynthia too. And I think Cynthia, I can imagine there being a part 2 or something down the road. But certainly for you, Cheryl, as we ponder, because one of the ideas we are exploring is, and I'm working with Joanne on this, who's normally on the call, is to do a virtual fair. And so this is my idea. So here we are here. So imagine a few more people, and we could create mini breakout rooms. And let's pretend for a moment, Cynthia, you're in breakout room 1. And so we'd have 5 people go chat with you. And then we could have Cheryl, you in breakout room 2. So it's a bit like being in a large room where you'd have the table set up. But this could all be done virtually. And I think the tremendous potential it has is we all have a desire for something like that, but we can't. But with the Zoom platform, it wouldn't be that hard to do that. So Joanne and I are working out the bugs to make sure it all could be feasible. And I think it could be quite an interesting way for you, because you have it still be an hour, right? And then for other people to gather and also participate in something that normally would be in person. But this way they could do so. So we'll certainly circle back with you and see if that might work for you too. Because I think again, I'll share with you, it'll be a funny story about funeral planning. Costco in the US, they have a coffin aisle. And so, Betty, as morbid as you thought it was to do what you did, imagine you're in Costco with your buggy, okay, and suddenly you turn down aisle number 4, and then there's coffins. I mean, it's a bit much. Okay. There we
are. You look at it, you say, boy, that for my party.
So my friend Louise, who passed a couple of years ago, she kept telling me she had pre-purchased or pre-planned her funeral and had a coffin. And I used to joke with her. I said, Louise, why don't you move your coffin into your living room and see if it fits? And she, see if it fits for size. It was being funny, of course, but yeah. No, I mean, I think pre-planning is a very good idea. But the part of it is knowing what to do and where to go, and maybe that's the whole part of it. Of having conversation with someone like you, Cynthia, to say what could it look like. definitely.
Yeah, I think it's important too.
The key part is reduce the anxiety. Yeah.
Yeah.
It happened to us when my father died quite suddenly. And so it was up to my brother and myself to, figure out what to do. So it's good to have some guidelines.
Mhm.
No, definitely. Yeah. Well, so next week we're going to have Debbie, Dan, Brooke. Obviously, probably we'll have some form of virtual labyrinth walk. We'll see how that works, and I have to chat with Debbie tomorrow about that. So we would have. Are you familiar with the labyrinth, Cynthia or Cheryl?
No, not at all.
It's a singular path. They go back thousands of years on every continent, but they had a resurgence in medieval Europe in certain churches. But again, there's only one way in and one way out. And the idea is we use the term often nowadays, mindfulness. So think of it as the ancients' way of having mindfulness. Because you're walking on the singular path, and there's only one way in and one way out, you just naturally, by walking, center yourself. And it's quite, and what Debbie plays is called the shakuhachi, which is a Japanese Buddhist flute. Normally men play it. But in this case, she managed to convince the Buddhist men that it was okay for women to learn. Good on Debbie.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to be classically trained, but yeah, so that'll be next week at the same time. Yes. So thank you, everybody, and
thank you.
delight to have these afternoon. We'll keep you posted how we make out creating the program and pathway for a virtual fair. Okay.
Please do.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Have a pleasant weekend.
Take care.
Take it,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye-bye.